I'll tell you what I told my son when he asked how it happened. Because he's old enough now to hear it straight, and because I've never been a man who dressed a thing up to make himself look better than he was. I rode into Coldwater Valley on a January morning when the temperature had no business being what it was, following the tracks of a gray roan mare who'd pulled her picket pin the night before and gone north toward the high country the way horses sometimes do when they've decided your hospitality isn't worth the fence. I crossed the frozen river at the Narrows, ice thick enough to hold the weight of the horse I still had, and I was maybe a quarter mile into the tree line when I looked up and found 7 crow riders sitting in a line across the trail. Not moving. Just watching me the way a man watches a thing he's already made a decision about. I'd heard plenty about the valley. Every man in Dunn's Crossing had an opinion about the Coldwater Band. Most of those opinions said to stay south of the river and mind your own affairs. I had minded my own affairs for 4 years on that ranch, and this was the first time my affairs had gone and crossed the river on their own. I sat still on my horse and kept my hands where they could see them, and I waited. They brought me to the camp. Not rough, not gentle, businesslike, the way you'd handle a stray animal you hadn't decided what to do with yet. The elder's name was Holds the Moon. He was a small man, and he looked at you the way very few men ever do, like he'd already set aside everything you were going to say and was reading the thing underneath it. He spoke in Crow first, and then a young man beside him translated. Though I had the feeling Holds the Moon understood more English than he let on. No white man comes to this valley in peace, the translation came. They come with a want. What is yours? I told him about the mare. He heard it without expression. And when you have the horse, I'll ride back south and you won't see me again. He looked at me a long time. Then he said something, and the young man told me. He says a man who cannot keep one horse is not a man who should be trusted with much. He says you will stay at the south edge of the camp until he decides what your word is worth. That was when I first saw Saya. She was standing at the edge of the circle of elders and riders, wrapped in a blanket the color of a winter sky, and she was watching me with the kind of attention that doesn't have heat in it. Just precision, the way a good rifle shooter watches a target before she's decided whether to pull the trigger. She said nothing. She didn't need to. I stayed. They gave me a spot at the camp's southern rim. A fire I was responsible for myself, and the clear understanding that I was being measured. Didn't know for what. I built the fire. I ate what I had in my saddlebags and didn't ask for more. In the morning I found that the gray roan had, apparently, already made herself at home in the camp's horse herd, because she came walking over to me like she'd arranged the whole thing, and I was simply slow to understand the plan. I could have left. I want you to understand that. The horse was found. No one was stopping me from riding south. I didn't leave. I'm not sure I could have explained it then. The honest answer, 42 years old with the grief of losing my wife, still sitting in my chest, like a stone that had no intention of moving, was that I didn't have much waiting for me south of the river that mattered more than what was happening here. The elder had said he was deciding what my word was worth. Something in me wanted to know what the answer would be. So I found work. That is the only way I know how to stand still. I find something useful to do with my hands. There was a section of fence at the south end of the camp, a rough thing they used to manage the horse herd that had come apart in the last storm. I fixed it. Not asked, not instructed. I looked at it, saw that it needed doing, and did it. Then I looked around for the next thing. So found me on the 3rd day, mending a section of hide on a drying frame that had split in the cold. You weren't told to do that, she said. English was careful and exact, each word placed the way you'd place a stone across a creek. Deliberate, no wasted steps. No, I said. Why? It needed doing. She watched me work for a while then. The elder says a man shows his nature in what he does when no one is keeping account. He's right, I said. He usually is, and she walked away. That was the beginning of it. Not a dramatic thing. Not a moment I can point to and say there, that is where it changed. It was a slow accumulation, the way a river changes. Course not in one flood but in 10,000 small pushes of water over time. She would come and watch me work. Then she would stay and talk. Then the talking became something I looked forward to. In a way I hadn't looked forward to anything in 4 years. She told me things about the valley that no map had and no white man's account had gotten right. She showed me where the elk came down in the deepest cold, where the river ran warm from a spring underneath the ice, where the old burn had left, the hillside open, and the new growth came back sweetest in the spring. She told me these things not to give them away, but to test how I held them, whether I cataloged them for use or just let them be what they were. Tried to let them be what they were. In return, she asked me about my wife, not prying, direct, the way she did everything. You carry her, she said one evening, watching the fire. Yes, I said. Did she ask you to? That stopped me. I sat with it. No, I said finally. I don't say she does. Saya didn't say anything else about it. She didn't need to. The traders came in February. There were 6 of them, led by a man named Creel, who had a piece of paper he claimed established a right-of-way through the southern section of the valley for a freight. Fruit he was trying to push through to the mining camps north of the divide. He was loud about it. He came in with his men spread out behind him, and he addressed, holds the moon the way a man addresses a problem he expects to go away on its own if he talks at it firmly enough. I was at the south edge of the camp when I heard it start. I walked over. Creel's paper was, I could see from across the circle, an improbable document. I'd spent 2 years before the ranch doing land survey work, and I knew what a legal right-of-way instrument looked like, and what a piece of fraudulent ambition looked like. And this was the second thing. That paper doesn't bind this land, I said. Creel turned and looked at me with the expression men use when a dog they didn't invite has spoken. Who in the hell are you? Man who holds the survey record for this valley. I didn't have it with me, but I knew what was in it. The southern parcel you're claiming right-of-way across runs through land under a Crow Council claim filed in the territorial record in 1871. Paper postdates that by 6 years, and it doesn't have a territorial judge's seal. Means nothing. You're bluffing. Ride to Dunn's Crossing and pull the record, I said. I'll wait. He didn't ride to Dunn's Crossing. Men like Creel only run their bluff when they believe the other side doesn't know the ground. When they find out you know it too, they reassess. He made noise for another few minutes, and then he and his men rode out the way they'd come in. And the valley was quiet again. I didn't look at Holds the Moon when it was over. I went back to what I'd been doing. I wasn't performing anything. I just knew that whatever was being decided about me, it wasn't going to be decided by me making a production of the moment. That night Holds the Moon asked me to sit with the elders. He spoke for a while in Crow. Then the young man translated. He says you stayed when you did not have to stay. He says you worked when no one was watching, he says. When the men came with a false paper, you stood in the gap, not with a weapon but with knowledge, which is a harder thing to fake. He says the valley has had enough of men who come with wants. He says you seem to have come with something else. What does he say that is, I said. The young man listened and then, he says he doesn't know yet. He says Saya will tell him. I looked across the fire. Saya was watching me. She didn't look away. Spring came the way it always does in high country, sudden, serious. Like an argument that had been building all winter finally arriving at its point. The snow came off the ridges in torrents, and the river ran fast and brown, and the new grass came up on the south slopes. So green it almost hurt to, gad. On the morning I finally saddled the gray roan to ride home, the real home ride, the one I'd been putting off for 6 weeks. By finding one more thing that needed doing, Saya walked out to where I stood. The elder has given his word, she said. What word is that? That you may come back to this valley. I held the reins and didn't say anything for a moment. That's a generous thing, I said. I'll try to be worth it. She looked at me the way she'd looked at me that first day. Precise and measuring. Then she reached out and set her hand in mine. Not a small thing on the frontier. Not a small thing anywhere. I didn't ride south that morning. I unsaddled the roan and put her back in the pasture, and went to find what needed doing next. The moon saw me from across the camp, and he said something to the young man beside him. The young man smiled and didn't bother to translate. My son asked me once what the valley looked like in the spring, and I told him. It looked like something worth spending a winter on. He pressed me for more, and I told him the truth, which was that I wasn't much good at describing a thing when the thing itself was standing right beside me, still willing to hold my hand after all these years. still reading me the way she had from the first morning, precise and clear-eyed and not fooled by any of it, and choosing to stay anyway. That's the whole of it. That is what my word turned out to be worth.